Hello, friends, and welcome back to me, Mommy, and Dad's story. Episode 6. Also, we have a special guest, Mr. Bunny.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning back in. This episode, we are going to pick up where we left off, and that was the journey back to the United States. And as you can imagine, we had a lot of anxiety and just a lot of nervousness about the trip itself, the logistics itself.
Whew.
Yes. So we had to be careful, and we were nervous about how we are going to get on the plane, how the flight is going to go, how we are going to be able to keep you safe. And that was mostly what occupied most of our thoughts, and it was on our mind. Never mind anything else about the big change of coming back to the US. We were excited to get you back, but we were extremely nervous. So we ended up just dealing with a lot, just the security on the airport. At every point, just being careful, being nervous that somebody doesn't either bump into you or kind of push us around. Remember, you have to go through and check the items like the stroller, everything by itself. So that was a lot. And we finally got through that, took a deep breath, and then was the tough part of actually getting you safe into a seat. So I was holding you, of course, and walking through the tight aisles. Not a lot of space.
Tight aisles.
Well, you know, when you're boarding the plane, everybody's kind of putting up their bags, and there's a lot of movement. So as we've mentioned at other times, we kind of waited till most people were situated, boarded the plane toward the end, and I had to be extremely careful as I'm walking through holding you, not to hit the seats, not to have somebody just randomly stand up and kind of push me or something of that nature. So that was something that made us very nervous. But luckily, we were able to get to our seats and position ourselves with nothing going bad. And then, of course, we were wondering, how are you going to just behave, or how are you going to feel at a flight that is 10 hours? So, yes.
10 hours?
10 hours. And remember, you were very, very young, still a baby.
So I probably cried, right?
We were thinking you're going to cry the whole flight, or you're going to, this is the first time in an airplane. We were nervous about that. So we were able to get on safely, got into our seats, and Kayman was holding you, kind of trying to make it as comfortable as possible, so you're laying down and you're in a safe position. And then we were just waiting, thinking, what's going to happen when the plane takes off? Yes, and believe it or not, the flight was on time, everything was good. And as the plane is taking off, you did start crying. So me and Mom were looking at each other like, is this going to be 10 hours? How are we going to soothe that? And once the plane got to its normal altitude, about a half an hour into it or so, we just looked over and noticed, what is Kevin doing? He is fast asleep. You fell asleep and slept through the whole flight. So we were
Even though landing?
No. That landing, that part you woke up, but the majority of the flight, and we were just sitting around constantly holding you, making sure you don't roll over or anything or position yourself in an uncomfortable way. And that's how the flight went. So we were very happy about that. And right when we were about to land is when you kind of woke up, made a couple of sounds, and the plane landed. Everything was well. Mommy was holding you, and we got through it. So
Yay!
yes. And actually, both of us were wondering, wow, Kevin just might like flying. This is great.
And I did.
Yes. So
Dun, dun, dun.
that was the silver lining of the trip. And we got back to the US, of course, you can imagine a lot of changes and trying to figure out how we're going to go forward, what's going to happen. And unfortunately, 3 days right after we were back in the United States trying to get settled in, you already had a fracture. And it was in the long bone, so it was a femur fracture. And that was the first time we had to figure out what hospital where, and it just so happens in our area was the hospital that you go to this day.
Yay!
And it specializes in osteogenesis imperfecta and a lot of other conditions that children have. So it's a specific children's hospital, but they did have, specifically we were directed to go to it to get to the OI team. So we went to the emergency room, we got admitted, and we were just so nervous trying to keep you safe and trying to get the right medicine so that you are not in pain. But we also didn't know. So that was our first encounter. And we were waiting there for quite a bit, about a good day without anything, just kind of pain medicine, but without any, yes.
A day?
Yes, an entire day without, we were actually wondering, we were ready to say, hey, are you gonna put a cast on him or something on that nature? So you were just sitting in the same position, kind of how we brought you in. And, obviously we were just heartbroken. We were just crying. You were crying a lot as well. I mean, you were in a lot of pain. So, I know. So the next day, we had someone from the team join us, and we found out that we were waiting from that afternoon, the day before, all through the night till the next day. One of the things that they do with these cases is actually, I mentioned that before, they try and figure out whether it is something that the parents did, because at such a young age, the bones are really cartilage, and they shouldn't be broken. And of course, Kevin wasn't able to let us know or tell him what's going on with him. You were just a baby, so
I couldn't communicate.
of course you couldn't. And I alluded to this before. So later they told us that if you are a young parent or somebody going through this is actually, unfortunately, one of the things you do have to worry about, is that there's a high chance there will be an accusation of mistreatment on the parents' part, which is extremely heartbreaking, because here you are worried about your child, of what they're going through. You don't know anything, and then on top of that, you might just be accused of something that obviously you didn't do. So the team, we had the genetics team, the orthopedic team, and all of them looked at Kevin. What they wanted to do is kind of right away give us a confirmation whether it is osteogenesis imperfecta, as it was known before brittle bone disease. And that's the first time we heard that term, osteogenesis imperfecta, because the brittle bones disease was, suspected. That's the term that was used in Europe, and here they told us that there is a new term. Now, right away from the sclera and other scans, they already 99% sure they knew. So they told us it is osteogenesis imperfecta, but they wanted our consent to do the genetic testing as well to have a confirmation and to find out where where exactly that mutation occurred. So that was really the first time we had a almost 100% confirmed diagnosis, and the team sat down with us and explained that it's going to be a whole team effort in care, and there's going to be different stages and what to look forward to. And the first kind of new way to handle the fracture was explained to us then. We were, of course, from before used to the idea of putting a hard cast on. And it's the first time they explained that they're not going to do that. It's kind of a soft wrap cast. It does get firm, so it does hold the leg in place or the part where there's a fracture. However, after I do believe the 3 or 4 week mark, depending on how the fracture heals, this particular one, you can cut it in half, kind of like 2 shells, and then put straps on it. And that allows us to actually take them off while bathing. And also afterwards, if you need to give you a little bit of possibility to move it around as you feel comfortable. So they explained to us very specifically, you do not move the leg or wherever the fracture may be, but the child himself or herself can actually start doing movements as they feel to. And of course, what if you have an itch or anything like that? It's wonderful to have access to it.
Definitely.
Yes. So we still have to be careful not to get it wet and all that, but this was a very different type.
Yes, and it made it a lot easier.
Yes, it did, and it made it more comfortable for you as well, because in this way, you didn't have to have that hole around the belly and the entire section. It could really just be right around where the fracture was, so it was a lot more comfortable.
Yay!
And that's the first time when we actually started to get some more information on what can happen and what will go on forward with you. We were explained about the possibility of the medication, which is pomidronate. It's a biphosphonate that would help with the bones as they are forming. Hopefully it would add minerals and other components, which I don't know exactly each one of the terms, but the mixture, the pomidronate, would actually make the bones stronger, the composition. And we also met with the doctor from genetics, and they explained a little bit more in detail. Again, we went over how actually bones work and how in the body, since you have osteogenesis imperfecta, the body recognizes that the bone it's building is not as good as it's supposed to be. So actually, as we are growing, all of us, the bones keep replacing themselves as they're building. So some of it is torn down and then new ones built. In this case, the body thinks that the bone that it's building is of not good quality. So it's actually breaking it down a lot faster. And it's not putting as much back in as it should. So that's why they explained you have the discrepancy in height. So the stature is affected greatly. And one other surprise that we had, and that is based on what we have heard from the doctors before, is they told us that it's quite the opposite as opposed to keeping you not moving. So one of the things that you really what you really need to do in this case is actually apply pressure and have movement. So it's the extreme opposite of what we were told, that you're going to have a shell and just stay in one position and keep you safe. Now they were telling us, look, the bone needs to have pressure on it. So it needs to bear some weight, and you need a lot of movement. And that is to make the muscles around the bone very strong so that they can also take some of that pressure off that would be felt on the bone. And that would allow you to do movement. So that's the first time they told us you're going to be kind of living on the edge. Always letting Kevin go as far as he thinks he can, and hopefully keep him from having fractures. But there is no clear guideline on how much you can do before something happens or how it happens. And so though that was a lot of information to take in. And first we concentrated just on getting you stabilized, taking care of that fracture. But then we had to start thinking about administering the medicine, getting you into that program, getting all your vaccines up to date, which was also, again, a difficult task, getting you integrated into the system here. And we started following up, going on the websites, looking at other cases as well, and documenting ourselves on what the possibilities may be. One of the very first things that they told us is, regarding the genetic testing, is that even though they will find out where the mutation occurred, there's not going to be a clear case to go by. So that means each mutation is different, and you will tell us, your body will tell us how it's going to affect you, how you're going to progress, how you're going to grow, and what you will be able to do later on. So that was the very first time we were kind of like, we were surprised that there is not going to be a clear set guide or anything to go by, that it's going to be just see as we go along. And we did the genetic testing, of course, and we came back to start getting the medicine. Of course, we agreed. We said, let's get the medicine as quickly as possible. And then we faced another challenge. As before, it was extremely tough to gain access to a good vein or to be able to place the treatment. The pomegranate would be a 3-day long process. So they wanted to make sure, yes, that you have a very good access to the vein, that they can draw blood, and also the medicine can go into the right place. Because if it's not getting in that vein, there are other issues, and it can cause a lot of pain. So while they were searching, finally we did get it in the first treatment, but already it was explained that it would be best for you to have a port placement. And of course, that's a major surgery, and it also had some drawbacks. It would, of course, certainly give access to administer the medicine, to draw blood as they needed for the tests, but it would have to be flushed every single month, and to make sure that the blood or anything doesn't clog up. So me and Mom had to really think about that, but in all reality, we had no other choice. Seeing what we have to go through just to get a vein, it actually put you in more danger of a fracture than having this operation. So we decided to go ahead and have the port placed, and we thought about it a lot and decided to have it placed on the right side to be away from the heart. And they explained to us that you're going to have a cut by the neck, and then of course the scar or the cut where they're going to place that mini port in there, and it's under the skin, and you would always feel that. When we would lift you up, we would always feel it, and you would have to be, for the flushing, stung through the skin every single time in that same place or very close by. I know. And so we did go ahead with the operation, which was successful, and we were very glad. That was the first major operation in the U.S. that we've done, the port placement. And then we were very nervous. There were also chances of complications, but luckily nothing like that happened. And from that point on, we had to go in every month, once a month, make sure that we flush it, take care of that port, so nothing happens. And then right around 2 weeks later, at that interval, we would go in for 3 days and administer the pomegranate, which would be your medicine. We were always asking them, could we somehow line them up, but it just wouldn't, because every once a month, every 4 weeks, you would have to have the flush, and every 6 weeks you would have the 3-day pomegranate treatment. So at that time we were in the hospital, as you can imagine, quite a lot, and it was really tough because we had to balance everything else, work and life at home, and going to the hospital. So it was a very tough time. But we knew that this medicine would help you. And of course, when we had the very first treatment, the team came again, and we started discussing more. By that time, we did have the genetic testing back, which did confirm that you have Osteogenesis Imperfecta. It detailed where the mutation occurred and how we got more information, how that particularly affects the collagen in the body. And so it was also explained that unfortunately that affects every single place where bone is formed. The joints, the bones, the entire body. I know, it's a lot to hear. And of course, me and Mom kept having questions, how tall are you going to grow? Are you going to be able to walk? Are you going to be able to do things? I mean, the normal questions that you would ask. And at that point, there was no clear answer. So again, it was all about you. Your body would tell us if you're going to try walking, standing, how tall you're going to grow. They already told us that whatever the initial height was going to be is going to be affected. You're going to be a lot shorter, so stature is going to be a lot less, but we didn't know, and we still don't know, the starting point. That is also determined by genetics. So the other thing about walking, whether you can or not, and what category you fit into, was also dependent on how the bones react. So what do I mean by that? Is there going to be a lot of bowing of the bones after fracture points, where the callus builds or where the bones form back together? Those are always stress points, so there's a lot more pressure on them. If they grow straight, there's a lower chance of them breaking again or being affected. So we started talking about all of that, and of course we were asking as well, what category or where do you fit into? And we were explained that there currently are 8 categories of OI, and the numbers don't really correspond to the severity or anything, so it's 1 through 8. But within the categories of 3, 4, which you would fall into, you also have different levels. So you would have mild, moderate, or severe. And that's when they really told us, don't focus so much on what category and what severity it's falling into. Because, for example, category 4 severe is obviously worse than category 3 mild, and so on and so forth. So what they said is we need to just focus on what your body is going to be telling us, how the bones react, 1, to the medicine, And that was also a concern initially because we didn't know if your body's going to react adversely to the pomegranate, whether it's going to go well or not. And initially, the very first treatment, you did have a mild fever afterwards, but we were extremely happy to find out that that went away, you were fine, and your body was reacting well to the pomegranate. So we knew that this was something that you would have to keep taking, and it is helping. Even though it's not specifically designed just for that, it does have beneficial qualities that do help. Yes, so we were learning more and more, and we were just hoping that you wouldn't have more fractures, that the pomegranate would help strengthen the bones. Of course, right away we were told, you can't just expect the pomegranate to do all of that. Fractures will happen. And we were also told, advised of the possibility, when the timing is right, and one of the key features that we agreed on is if you show signs that you do want to stand and walk by yourself, we were told to consider the placement of rods. Now, these are special rods for OI patients that go right in the middle of the bone, and they help stabilize it, take some of that pressure off in case there's a fracture, so that the bones don't fracture into many places. So they would be held in together. And one of the benefits would be that it would definitely help stabilize the bones when you do put pressure on them, or when you try and walk or do other things. But this was a little bit further along the way, because in the beginning we had to make sure that you can move about, get some movement, see how you are going to behave, and of course we wanted to wait to see what happens with the bones themselves. Unfortunately, you started having a lot of fractures, and it was in different parts, and usually the long bones. So you would have fracture in the arm or in the leg. And what really concerned us, is that it wasn't as a result of falling or putting impact on it. So you would just be sitting in bed and trying to move about or doing your turns, and then you would turn and have a fracture, or you would roll around and have a fracture. And now we were going in for the medicine, and we were also taking care of the fracture. So a lot of earlier you were in different casts a lot of times, and we were going through the treatments, getting the port flushed, and dealing with the casts and with the fractures. And that's when we really started thinking about putting the rods, getting the rod placement. But that will bring us to the next episode, and we will talk about that at next time. So please tune in for the next episode. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye-bye, friends.
Bye.